Fate may bind a wolf to its mate, but a brutal betrayal can shatter even the strongest chains. What happens when the realm's most powerful alpha king rejects his destined match, only for the fragile Omega to smile and whisper her gratitude? Prepare for a medieval tale of twisted royal bloodlines, shattered bonds, and a vengeance centuries in the making. Frost clung to the massive stone walls of Keep Ethelgard like a second skin, a bitter testament to the harsh winter that had descended upon the northern territories. Inside the great hall, the air was thick with the scent of roasted venison, spilled ale, and the sharp, suffocating pheromones of hundreds of dominant werewolves. Torches crackled in iron sconces, casting long, dancing shadows over the assembled nobility. Tonight was the winter solstice feast, but everyone in the kingdom knew it was merely a masquerade for a much darker ceremony. Genevieve stood at the edge of the dais, her thin frame swallowed by a heavy woolen cloak that did nothing to stop her violent shivering. She was 20 years old, yet she looked as fragile as spun glass. Her pale skin was translucent, her dark hair brittle, and her eyes, once a vibrant, piercing blue, were clouded with a permanent, exhausting haze. To the lords and ladies of Ethelgard, she was an embarrassment. The moon goddess had played a cruel joke by tethering the fate of their magnificent king to a weak, sickly Omega. At the center of the hall stood King Gareth. He was a leviathan of a man, clad in boiled leather and the thick furs of a dire bear he had slain with his bare hands. His presence alone was enough to force lesser wolves to their knees. Beside him stood Lady Isolde of the Crimson Ridge, a stunning, fierce female alpha whose golden hair and radiant strength made her the obvious logical choice for a queen. Genevieve kept her gaze fixed on the stone floor, listening to the murmurs of the crowd. "Look at her," sneered Lord Harrington, a wealthy baron from the eastern borders, whispering loudly to Lady Celeste. "She cannot even stand without leaning against the pillar. How she survived her first transformation is a mystery known only to the saints." "She is a blight on the royal line," Celeste murmured back. "King Gareth has endured this humiliation long enough." They were right, of course. Gareth hated her. From the moment the mate bond snapped into place 3 years ago on his Ascension Day, he had treated Genevieve with nothing but disdain. He locked her in the drafty Eastern Tower, feeding her scraps, forbidding her from attending pack meetings, and refusing to complete the mating process. Yet, despite the distance, the bond remained a heavy, suffocating chain around Genevieve's throat, slowly draining the very life from her veins. Gareth raised a silver goblet, and silence instantly fell over the massive hall. The heavy oak doors were bolted shut. No one was permitted to leave until the king had spoken. "Lords and ladies of Ethelgard," Gareth's voice boomed, rich and resonant, vibrating through the chest cavities of every wolf present. "For 3 years, our pack has grown in strength. We have conquered the rebel factions of the southern marshes, and we have brought prosperity to our lands. But a king cannot lead without a queen who matches his ferocity." He turned his piercing amber eyes toward Genevieve. The disgust radiating from him hit her like a physical blow, but she did not flinch. She simply watched him, her heart beating a slow, hollow rhythm. "The moon goddess is not infallible," Gareth continued, his voice dripping with venom. "She binds us with archaic magic, blind to the realities of war and survival. I will not let the legacy of my father, King Leofric, be tainted by a weak, pathetic creature who cannot even run with the pack. A true king chooses his own destiny." He stepped down from the dais, his heavy boots echoing on the stone. He stopped inches from Genevieve. The sheer heat radiating from his massive body made her sway, but she forced herself to remain upright. "Genevieve of the lower valleys," Gareth sneered, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate growl that echoed in the silent hall. "You are nothing. You are a leech upon my court, a frail ghost pretending to be a wolf. I strip you of your title. I strip you of your place in this pack. And I sever the string of fate." He drew a ceremonial silver dagger from his belt and sliced his own palm. The scent of alpha blood filled the air, rich and intoxicating. "I, King Gareth of Ethelgard, reject you, Genevieve, as my fated mate. I banish you from my sight and my lands. May the winter claim you." A collective gasp swept through the hall. Rejection was a death sentence for an Omega. The tearing of the soul bond was known to drive the rejected mad, causing their internal organs to rupture from the mystical trauma. The crowd watched with bated breath, expecting the frail girl to collapse, to scream, to beg, or to bleed out on the cold stone. For a moment, Genevieve closed her eyes. She felt the ancestral magic snapping inside her chest. It felt like a rusted iron hook, lodged deep within her ribcage, was suddenly and violently yanked out. A profound, terrifying emptiness followed. Then came the rush. It started in her toes, a spark of warmth that hadn't been there in over a decade. It rushed up her calves, flooded her stomach, and exploded in her lungs. The suffocating fog in her mind evaporated, leaving behind a sharp, crystalline clarity. The permanent ache in her joints vanished. Genevieve opened her eyes. The clouded haze was gone, replaced by a terrifying, luminescent silver glow that nobody in the dim lighting seemed to notice yet. She looked up at the towering Alpha King. He stood with his bleeding hand outstretched, a cruel, victorious smirk plastered across his handsome face. He was waiting for her to fall. He was waiting for her to break. Instead, Genevieve's lips curved upward. It started as a small twitch, then blossomed into a serene, beautiful, and utterly chilling smile. "Finally," she whispered. Her voice, usually a raspy, timid squeak, rang out clear and melodic, cutting through the heavy silence of the hall like a sharpened blade. Gareth's smirk faltered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What did you say?" Genevieve didn't answer him. She simply turned her back on the King of Ethelgard, pulled her thin woolen cloak tighter around her newly invigorated shoulders, and walked away. Her steps, which only moments before had been shuffling and hesitant, were now smooth, silent, and deadly graceful. The crowd parted for her as if she were a ghost. Lord Harrington stared, open-mouthed, as she glided past him. She walked straight to the heavy oak doors, unbarred the massive iron latches with a sudden, impossible strength that no Omega should possess, and stepped out into the raging blizzard without looking back. The winter storm swallowed Genevieve the moment she stepped past the portcullis. But for the first time in her life, the cold did not bite. It embraced her. She ran. 2 miles from Keep Ethelgard, deep within the whispering pines, she threw off the heavy woolen cloak, letting it drop into the snow. The magic binding her human form was fracturing. She fell to her hands and knees, but it was not from pain. It was a shedding. For 10 years, she had been told she was a runt. When her wolf had first awakened, it had been dormant, silent, a dead thing inside her mind. But as she knelt in the snow, she heard a voice ancient, feminine, and terrifyingly powerful. "We are unchained," the voice purred in her mind. "The parasite is removed." Genevieve screamed as her bones began to elongate and snap, but it was a scream of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Fur erupted from her skin, not the patchy, scruffy brown coat she had produced during her one and only failed shift as an adolescent, but thick, luminous, blinding white fur. She grew, expanding far beyond the size of a standard Omega, matching the sheer, muscular bulk of a royal Alpha. When the shift was complete, a massive, snow-white wolf with glowing silver eyes stood in the forest clearing. She threw her head back and let out a howl that shattered the frozen silence of the woods. It was a song of liberation, vibrating with an ancient magic that made the trees tremble. The truth of her existence was a secret buried in the royal archives, a truth King Leofric had taken to his grave. Genevieve was not an Omega. She was a White-Eye, a legendary bloodline of conduit wolves dating back to the era of Saint Columba and the first lycanthropes of Europe. Conduits were living vessels of the moon goddess's raw earthly magic. King Leofric had known his son, Gareth, was born dangerously weak. To ensure his dynasty's survival, Leofric had consulted dark, forbidden blood witches in the eastern steppes. They located the last surviving conduit, a 10-year-old Genevieve, and forcefully forged a false mate bond, turning her into a living battery. For 10 years, the bond had siphoned her life force, her strength, and her magic, funneling it directly into Gareth. Gareth's unnatural size, his terrifying strength, his rapid healing, none of it was his, it was hers. By rejecting her, Gareth had not discarded a weak mate, he had unplugged himself from his only source of power. Genevieve ran through the night, covering distance that would have killed horses. By dawn, she had crossed the perilous, jagged peaks of the Dragontooth Mountains and entered the neutral territory of the Valley of Darrow. This land was governed by Lord Percival, an exiled scholar lord who maintained his independence from Ethelgard through sheer strategic brilliance and an impenetrable fortress. Percival was an old wolf, his muzzle graying, his body scarred from decades of surviving the brutal politics of the northern packs. When Genevieve arrived at the gates of Darrow Keep, still in her human form but radiating an aura of raw, untamed power, the guards crossed their spears. "Halt. State your business," the captain demanded. "Tell Lord Percival," Genevieve said, her voice steady and commanding, "that the Silvermane bloodline did not die at the Battle of the Red Ford. Tell him Genevieve has returned, and she requires an audience." Within moments, she was escorted into the warm, firelit study of the Lord. Percival sat behind a heavy oak desk, surrounded by crumbling, leather-bound tomes and ancient maps of the European continent. He looked up, his sharp green eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the young woman. "The Silvermanes are a myth," Percival rumbled, standing up. "A fairy tale used to frighten pups." "Are they?" Genevieve asked. She didn't shift, but she allowed her eyes to flare. The irises shifted from human blue to a blinding metallic silver. The sheer pressure of her aura filled the room, cracking the glass of the window panes and forcing Percival's beta, who stood in the corner, to fall to one knee, gasping for air. Percival gripped the edges of his desk, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "By the goddess, you were the creature bound to the boy king." "I was his prisoner," Genevieve corrected coldly. "His father's dark magic turned me into a parasite's host. But last night, the arrogant fool severed the bond himself. He rejected me." Percival let out a sudden, booming laugh, running a hand through his graying hair. "He rejected you? He cut the very cord that fed him his strength?" The old lord's laughter echoed off the stone walls. "The boy is doomed. He has signed his own death warrant." "I am not here for his death, Percival." "Not yet," Genevieve said, stepping closer to the fire, letting the warmth soak into her skin. "I am here for my birthright. For 10 years, my mind was clouded, but the memories of my ancestors are awakening. There are others of my bloodline scattered across the continent, hidden as omegas, abused and forgotten. I will build an army, and I will tear Ethelgard down to its foundation stones." Percival bowed his head, exposing his neck in a sign of absolute submission, an act a dominant alpha rarely performed. "The Valley of Darrow is yours, my queen. Where do we begin?" Back at Keep Ethelgard, the celebration had continued long into the night. Following the rejection, Gareth wasted no time. Under the light of the full moon, before the high priest of the pack, he officially claimed Lady Isolde as his queen and fated mate. As his teeth sank into her neck, marking her, Gareth expected a surge of unparalleled power. Isolde was the strongest female in the kingdom. Their union was supposed to elevate him to the status of a living god among wolves. But as the blood flowed over his tongue, a strange sensation washed over him, or rather, a lack thereof. There was no lightning in his veins, no roaring of the inner wolf. Instead, a cold, dull ache settled deep into his bones. He ignored it, attributing it to the exhaustion of the winter solstice rituals. 2 days later, the cracks began to show. Gareth stood in the training yard, the frost crunching beneath his boots. He was stripped to the waist, the cold air rolling off his heated skin in waves of steam. Opposite him stood Cedric, his beta and closest friend. Cedric was a massive, scarred brute, renowned for his speed, but in sparring matches, Gareth had always bested him within seconds, tossing him aside like a rag doll. "Come on, Cedric," Gareth barked, rolling his shoulders. "Don't hold back today." Cedric charged, his fist flying toward Gareth's jaw. Gareth moved to intercept, muscle memory dictating a block and a crushing counterblow. But his arm moved sluggishly. The terrifying, explosive speed he had relied on for the past 3 years simply wasn't there. Cedric's fist connected with Gareth's jaw with the force of a battering ram. The Alpha King was lifted off his feet and sent crashing into the hard, frozen mud. Silence descended upon the training yard. The guards on the battlements stopped their patrols. The squires dropped their practice swords. The king of Ethelgard had just been floored by a single punch. Gareth lay in the mud, his ears ringing, tasting copper. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He scrambled to his feet, wiping the blood from his mouth, his golden eyes flashing with fury. Lucky strike, Gareth spat, though his chest heaved with an unfamiliar exhaustion. Again, Cedric, looking horrified by his own success, stepped back. "My king, perhaps we should rest." The mating ceremony. "I said again!" Gareth roared, lunging forward. He swung a massive right hook, but Cedric easily ducked under it and shoved Gareth in the chest. Gareth stumbled backward, his legs trembling beneath him. His lungs burned as if he had run 20 miles. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. The boundless, infinite well of energy that usually hummed beneath his skin was completely dry. Later that evening, Gareth sat in his private chambers, staring into the roaring fireplace. His jaw was heavily bruised, a bruise that, bizarrely, had not healed within minutes, as it usually did. It was purple and swollen, a glaring symbol of mortal weakness. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Queen Isolde entered. She wore a gown of deep crimson velvet, her blonde hair woven with gold threads, looking every inch the royal monarch. But her eyes were calculating, sharp like broken glass. "The servants are gossiping," Isolde said smoothly, pouring a goblet of spiced wine and bringing it to him. "They say Cedric laid you low in the yard today. They say the king is unwell." "They are fools," Gareth snapped, snatching the goblet from her hand. "I am merely fatigued." Isolde trailed a delicate finger over his bruised jaw. "Are you, my love, or did you make a grave miscalculation?" Gareth swatted her hand away. "What are you talking about?" "I am not a fool, Gareth," Isolde said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I felt the bond when you marked me. There was nothing there. You are empty, and the land feels it too." She walked to the arched window, looking out over the snow-covered kingdom. The crops in the southern greenhouses have withered overnight. The eastern river has frozen solid, killing the fish. The Alpha's vitality is tied to the land, Gareth, and you are rotting from the inside out. "Silence!" Gareth roared, throwing the silver goblet. It smashed against the stone wall, spilling dark red wine like blood. Isolde didn't flinch. She simply stared at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You threw away the Omega. Everyone thought she was a leech. But what if, my dear king, you were the leech?" Before Gareth could respond, she turned and glided out of the room, leaving him alone with his rising terror. Isolde's words planted a seed of paranoia that quickly blossomed into madness. That night, Gareth descended into the deepest levels of Keep Ethelgard, into the royal crypts and archives where the dust of centuries lay undisturbed. He searched frantically through the journals of his father, King Leofric. For hours he pored over rotting parchments and leather-bound diaries. Finally, near dawn, he found a hidden ledger bound in black iron. The text was written in Leofric's hurried scrawl. "The boy's core is shattered. He will not survive the transition to Alpha. The witches of the East have provided a solution. We found a white eye in the lower valleys, a conduit. I have performed the blood binding. The girl, Genevieve, will act as his anchor and his battery. As long as she is bound to him, he will possess the strength of the gods. He must never know the truth. He must believe the power is his own. If the bond is ever severed, the magic will return to the conduit and Gareth will wither into dust." Gareth dropped the journal. His hands shook violently. The words blurred before his eyes as the horrifying reality crashed down upon him. Genevieve wasn't a weak, pathetic Omega. She was a weapon of mass destruction, a vessel of divine power, and he had spent the last 3 years torturing her. Worse, he had arrogantly, publicly, and irreversibly cut the cord that kept him strong. He remembered her smile in the great hall, the chilling, beautiful smile. Finally, she had known, or her wolf had known. She had been waiting for him to make the mistake. "Guards!" Gareth screamed, his voice cracking with desperation, echoing off the crypt walls. "Guards!" Heavy footsteps thundered down the stone stairs. The captain of the guard appeared, breathless. "My king?" "Saddle the horses," Gareth ordered, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Summon the trackers. We ride for the Whispering Pines. We must find the Omega. But my king, she has been gone for 2 days. The blizzards." "Find her," Gareth roared, spit flying from his lips. "If she crosses the borders, if she finds sanctuary, we are all dead." High above, in a secluded chamber of the keep, Queen Isolde sat by candlelight, writing a small scroll. She rolled the parchment, sealed it with black wax, and tied it to the leg of a trained raven. The letter was addressed to Lord Harrington. It read, "The king is broken. His strength is a lie. Prepare your forces at the eastern border. The throne of Aethelgard will soon be empty." She released the bird into the frigid night sky, watching it vanish into the darkness. Betrayal, it seemed, was contagious, and the fall of the Alpha King had only just begun. Snow whipped across the jagged battlements of Darrow Keep, but inside the ancient fortress, a fire of rebellion was being stoked into an inferno. Genevieve stood at the head of a massive war table carved from petrified oak, her presence dominating the room. Only 3 days had passed since her rejection, but she was unrecognizable. The frail, sickly girl in the moth-eaten cloak was dead. In her place stood a queen carved from ice and starlight. Her posture was razor straight, her skin flushed with a radiant, almost predatory vitality, and her eyes, those terrifying luminescent silver orbs, commanded absolute authority. Lord Percival stood to her right, acting as her chief strategist, but they were no longer alone. The whispers of a white-eye awakening had spread through the supernatural underground with the speed of a forest fire. Driven by ancient prophecies and a desperate hope for freedom from tyrannical alphas, powerful families who had remained neutral in the northern conflicts began to arrive at Darrow's gates. "We have secured the allegiance of the Sinclair dynasty from the Western Isles," Percival announced, pointing to a sprawling map of the territories. "And Lord Astor, who controls the wealth of the southern marshes, has pledged his elite guard to your cause. Even the Habsburg cavalry, long thought disbanded after the Great Wars, have sent envoys to swear fealty to the true conduit." Genevieve traced the map with a delicate, lethal finger. "Ethelgard is bleeding," she murmured, her voice vibrating with that strange, dual resonance of her inner wolf. "King Leofric built an empire on a foundation of stolen magic. Without me to power the wards, their crops die, their rivers freeze, and their Alpha King rots in his own skin. We do not need to siege the castle, Percival. We only need to wait for the walls to collapse from the inside." A heavy knock echoed through the chamber, and a guard entered, dragging a battered, bloody figure and tossing him to the stone floor. It was Fenwick, King Gareth's chief tracker. He was a notoriously cruel wolf, known for hunting down rogue Omegas for sport. Now he was trembling uncontrollably, his left arm hanging at a sickening angle. "He was caught trying to breach the outer perimeter," the guard reported, bowing deeply to Genevieve. "He claims he was sent by the king." Genevieve stepped away from the table, the metallic clinking of the silver armor plates she now wore echoing in the silence. She knelt gracefully in front of the broken tracker. Fenwick recoiled, whimpering as the oppressive, crushing aura of the white eye slammed into his chest. "Did my former king send you to bring me back, Fenwick?" she asked softly, tilting his chin up with one finger. "He demands your return," Fenwick stammered, tears of raw terror freezing on his bruised cheeks. He is unwell. The kingdom is fracturing. He ordered us to drag you back in chains if necessary." Genevieve offered a smile that chilled the marrow in Fenwick's bones. It was the same smile she had given Gareth before walking out of the Great Hall. "You will return to Ethelgard," she whispered, her silver eyes flaring so brightly that Fenwick had to squeeze his eyes shut against the blinding light. "You will tell Gareth that the chain he severed can never be reforged. Tell him that I am not just a wolf. I am the judgment of the moon goddess. And tell him that if he wishes to see me again, he must come to Darrow and crawl on his hands and knees." She stood up, dismissing him with a flick of her wrist. "Bind his wounds, so he survives the journey, then throw him out." Meanwhile, Back in the sprawling, oppressive halls of Keep Ethelgard, paranoia had entirely consumed King Gareth. He was a shadow of the Leviathan he had once been. His broad shoulders had sunken, his golden eyes were bloodshot and erratic, and a sickly, grayish pallor clung to his skin. He paced the length of his throne room, coughing violently into a silk handkerchief, pulling it away to reveal flecks of dark, almost black blood. His strength was evaporating by the hour. When he tried to shift into his wolf form the previous night, the transformation had failed, leaving him writhing in agony on his bedchamber floor, his bones snapping and refusing to set. He was trapped in a weakening human shell. "Where are my trackers?" Gareth roared, his voice cracking, lacking the alpha resonance that once made men tremble. "It has been 5 days. Where is the Omega?" Queen Isolde stood near the hearth, filing her nails with a casual, almost bored expression. She wore the crown of Ethelgard, but she looked at her husband with undisguised contempt. "Perhaps your trackers froze to death, Gareth," Isolde said coldly. "Or perhaps they realized they were serving a hollow shell and deserted. Lord Harrington's armies have massed at the eastern border. They are not flying Ethelgard banners. They are flying the colors of rebellion." Gareth whirled around, baring his teeth. "You knew of this! You conspired with Harrington!" "I conspired with survival," Isolde snapped back, slamming her file onto the mantelpiece. "I mated with the most powerful alpha in the realm, only to discover I had shackled myself to a fraud. You stole your strength from a child, Gareth, and now that she has taken it back, you are dragging us all into the abyss. I will not let you destroy this kingdom." "I am the king!" Gareth screamed, drawing his broadsword. The blade, which he used to wield with one hand effortlessly, now felt impossibly heavy. His arms shook under the weight. Before he could take a step toward his traitorous queen, the grand doors of the throne room slammed open. Cedric, his beta, rushed in, looking completely frantic. "My king!" Cedric gasped, ignoring the drawn sword. "Fenwick has returned. He is the only survivor of the tracking party." Gareth dropped the sword, his desperate eyes lighting up with a pathetic glimmer of hope. "Where is she? Did he bring her?" "No, sire," Cedric said softly, looking at Gareth with a mixture of pity and deep sorrow. "She is at Darrow Keep. She has raised the banners of the Silvermane bloodline. The Sinclair and Astor families have rallied to her side. And she sent a message." Cedric hesitated, swallowing hard. "Speak it," Gareth commanded, coughing violently. "She said if you wish to see her, you must go to Darrow and crawl on your hands and knees." Isolde let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Gareth's face turned purple with a mix of fury and absolute terror. He grabbed Cedric by the collar, though his grip was pitifully weak. "Muster the remaining loyal forces," Gareth hissed, spittle flying from his lips. "Call every man who still fears my name. We march on Darrow, keep it first light. I will rip the magic from her veins myself if I have to." War drums echoed through the valley of Darrow, a rhythmic, thundering heartbeat that shook the snow from the pine trees. Gareth's army had arrived. It was a desperate, ragged force of 3,000 wolves, driven not by loyalty, but by the lingering fear of a king who was rapidly decaying before their eyes. Gareth sat atop his massive black warhorse, swathed in heavy furs and iron plate armor that seemed too large for his shrinking frame. He looked up at the impenetrable stone walls of Darrow Keep. The air was bitterly cold, but Gareth was sweating, his breathing shallow and ragged. He could feel his life force draining into the frozen earth. He needed the conduit. He needed his battery back. "Tear down the gates," Gareth ordered, his voice thin and reedy. "Kill everyone who stands in your way, but bring the White Eye to me alive." Before a single siege engine could be moved, the massive iron-reinforced gates of Darrow Keep slowly creaked open on their own. The screech of metal against stone silenced the war drums. Gareth's army hesitated, their mounts nervously stamping the snowy ground. From the dark maw of the fortress, a lone figure emerged. It was Genevieve. She did not wear armor. She wore a flowing gown of pure white silk that seemed to glow against the bleak winter landscape. She walked barefoot in the snow, yet the frost melted instantly where she stepped. Behind her walked Lord Percival, Lady Sinclair, and the heavily armed elite guards of the Astor family. But Genevieve waved them back. She faced the army of 3,000 alone. Gareth kicked his horse forward, breaking the ranks. He rode out to meet her, his heart pounding with a sickening mixture of rage and desperate craving. As he drew near, the sheer, crushing weight of her magical aura hit him like a physical wall. His warhorse whinnied in terror, bucking wildly before collapsing to its knees, refusing to move closer to the apex predator standing before them. Gareth was thrown from the saddle, tumbling ungracefully into the snow. He scrambled to his feet, his armor clanking awkwardly, and drew his sword. "Genevieve!" he roared, pointing the trembling blade at her. "I command you to submit. I am your king. I am your alpha. Rebind the tether, or I will slaughter every soul in this valley." Genevieve stopped 10 paces from him. She looked at him not with anger, but with profound, devastating pity. "Look at yourself, Gareth," she said, her melodic voice echoing effortlessly across the vast valley, heard clearly by every soldier in his army. "You are a hollow vessel. You built a kingdom on the blood of an Omega you despised, ignorant of the fact that she was the only thing keeping you alive. You rejected me, Gareth. You severed the chain." "I take it back!" Gareth screamed, his facade crumbling entirely. He dropped his sword and stumbled toward her, falling to his knees, just as she had commanded through Fenwick. "I claim you! I claim you as my queen, my mate, my everything. Just give it back. Give me back my strength." He reached out, his bloody, trembling fingers grasping at the hem of her white gown. Genevieve looked down at the broken king. "Magic is not a toy you can discard and reclaim at your convenience, little boy. The moon goddess demands balance. For 10 years, you stole my light. Now, I will take the rest of your darkness." Suddenly, a loud horn blasted from the ridge overlooking the valley. Gareth's army looked up in panic. Thousands of heavily armored wolves appeared on the cliffs, bearing the crimson and black banners of Lord Harrington. And leading them, riding a magnificent white stallion, was Queen Isolde. Isolde looked down at her husband kneeling in the snow. "The king is dead," she shouted to Gareth's bewildered troops. "Lay down your arms, and you will be spared. Fight for a dead man, and you will perish in this valley." Gareth's beta, Cedric, looked from the overwhelming forces on the ridge to the pathetic, groveling figure of his king. Slowly, Cedric drove his sword into the snow and stepped away. One by one, the soldiers of Ethelgard followed suit. Weapons clattered to the frozen ground. The rebellion was over before a single drop of blood had been spilled. Gareth sobbed, a wretched, ugly sound. He clung to Genevieve's dress, his golden eyes wide with madness. "Isolde betrayed me. My beta betrayed me. But you, we are bound by fate. Save me, Genevieve." "Fate," Genevieve whispered, her silver eyes glowing with the intensity of a dying star. "Fate is a concept invented by weak men to justify their cruelty." She reached down and placed a glowing, silver-infused hand upon Gareth's forehead. He gasped, his eyes rolling back in his head. "I, Genevieve of the Silver Mane, true conduit of the moon goddess, reject you, Gareth of Ethelgard," she spoke, her voice booming like thunder, shaking the very bedrock of the valley. "I strip you of your alpha status. I strip you of your wolf. I banish the beast within you to the eternal dark. You will live the rest of your short, miserable days as a human, feeling every ounce of the weakness you forced upon me." A blinding flash of silver light erupted from her hand. Gareth let out a blood-curdling scream as the ancient magic tore through his body, not killing him, but fundamentally altering his soul. The wolf within him, the ancestral spirit of his bloodline, was extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. When the light faded, Gareth collapsed into the snow, weeping hysterically. He was no longer an alpha. He was not even an omega. He was just a frail, sickly human man, clutching at the frozen earth. Genevieve stepped past him, not giving him a second glance. She walked toward the center of the valley, her silver eyes sweeping over the kneeling armies of Ethelgard, the forces of Lord Harrington, and the treacherous Queen Isolde, who had now dismounted and was bowing her head in cautious reverence. "This kingdom is built on rot," Genevieve proclaimed, her voice echoing with sovereign absolute power. "Today, Ethelgard falls. From its ashes, the Silver Empire rises. I am no one's Omega. I am your queen. And anyone who questions my claim can meet my wolf. As if to punctuate her words, she shifted instantly, transforming into the colossal, radiant white wolf. She let out a deafening, earth-shattering howl that ripped through the clouds, parting the winter storm to reveal the bright, blinding sun. Every single wolf in the valley, Alpha, Beta, and Omega alike, dropped to their bellies, exposing their necks in absolute, unquestioning submission to the true power of the White Eye. The weak Omega had smiled, walked away, and returned to conquer the world. Thank you so much for diving into this epic tale of betrayal, hidden power, and ultimate revenge. If you loved witnessing Genevieve's breathtaking transformation from a bullied Omega into the unstoppable Silver Queen, please hit that like button to support the channel. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow fantasy romance lovers, and absolutely smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our thrilling supernatural stories. What did you think of Gareth's punishment? Let me know in the comments below.